welcome to my channel. Today I have for you another guest design post from the Counterfeit Kit Club Challenge, and here is the kit that I built for their challenge for the month of September. And if you haven't seen that, go ahead and find the link and check out that video. Today is based on a prompt of using a grid, and the Counterfeit Kit Club offers up a couple of challenges a month to help you use up the kit that you build. And so to build my grid, I am choosing a whole bunch of pattern papers, and I'm just kind of speeding through this process a little bit. And I choose this calmer pattern to be the background of my photo. And what I'm going to do here is crop my photo to a 4x4 square. And that is going to be the square basis for a grid of pattern papers that will go all the way around. And I have to tell you, it was pretty hard to cut just one little square out of all this pattern paper, but sometimes the sacrifices we have to make as scrapbookers. Okay, so here's what it looks like with all of my little squares cut out, and I chose pattern papers that kind of went along with a picnic theme since that's what the photo is of. And I was sure to kind of separate out different colors of the pattern paper into kind of visual triangle kind of pieces. So reds opposite reds and yellows opposite yellows and whatnot. And then I decide I want a few more layers to this pattern. So I'm going to back this whole entire grid on this sheet of wood grain, and since it is kind of a bark texture, I thought that would work really well with a picnic photo at the park. And I decide I want to offset my photo even more, so I choose another darker color of this wood grain bark texture, and I give my photo a bit of a matte with that, and so it will kind of overlay the rest of the grid and hopefully be the star of the show. So I take my first bark pattern paper here, and I'm going to actually gut it out a little bit because I do have a couple more layouts in mind that I would really love this natural bark texture to use. So I don't want to use all that paper on this layout. And since there's a good block in the middle there, I will just cut it out and it will get covered up with the photos and the squares. And then you see I have that multicolor piece of paper off to the left there. I want to tie all the colors of these pattern papers together in one piece of paper, and that helps create some cohesiveness. So I cut off just a tiny strip, just a smidgen, and that will come into play when I build my title. Now I am ready to kind of start adhering all of these pieces down to my background paper, and I start laying out my grid again. And I realize my photo used to be a 4x4 square, but because I added the mat, it is no longer 4x4. So I did go ahead and cut out of a scrap piece of cardstock another 4x4 square to give myself an edge to push all of those pattern paper squares up against, and that helps keep my grid straight. So I will get to gluing all of these pieces down, and then we'll come back after that is done. Okay, that last piece is going into place, and then I'm ready for my photo. I add some foam squares to the back of it because I want to give it even more dimension, because this is a little bit of a busy pattern going on around it, and I want it to stand out a bit more. So I pop it down there in the middle, and the dimension is just what I wanted. It's hard to pick up on camera, but it's giving the effect that I was hoping for. And so now I turn my attention to that pattern paper strip, and it's longer than I need. I decide to trim off the end with the purple hues because there's none of that going on in my pattern papers. And I tuck it under that little mat, and it's just a hint of colors that tie everything together. And it also gives me a place to build my title. So I'm going to use my little alphabet template here, and I'm going to start spelling out my title, and I won't make you watch the whole thing. So now that my title is there, I'm ready to kind of start adhering stuff down. And I really do just give a smidgen of that color there. And I love this template. I use it all the time. It's just a sheet of plastic that I drew a little bit of a grid on, and that helps me line up my letters and get them straighter than I would otherwise. I can't say that it's perfect, but it makes me much happier than doing it by hand. And this way I can space out my alphabet ahead of time before I start sticking them to my layout, and then I'm kind of stuck for spacing. Okay, so that is the main part of the title, and then I'm going to turn to these red letters, and I'm going to spell out the rest of the title, and the whole title is going to read, "This is how we social distance." And while I'm finishing off that titling, part of the reason why I chose to do this style of layout was that those blocks of patterns reminded me of a quilt, which is a kind of blanket, and we do use a picnic blanket whenever we go to the park and have a picnic. So that tied in very well with the theme for this page. So I was happy to use this prompt with this photo. Okay, so now that I've got all that in place, I am ready to do a little bit of embellishing. I want to use some arrows for some emphasis. I may use some twine. I had cut apart these little animal pieces, but I'm not sure they're going to work out. So here is what I ended up doing. I kind of got a little punny here, and I wrote down who, as if these owls were asking who was nearby us. And then on a separate little piece of paper, I wrote no one. And I just repeated this. And that gives me the emphasis of our social distance picnic visit. Now, in order to make those little circle punches with the word who on it look like speech bubbles for my owls, I thought I was going to just circle punch more of the same pattern paper. But then I got the thought of, I have these enamel dots here. Why not just use those, especially since they're in multiple sizes? I can just curve them up and make them into little speech bubbles. So I thought that worked out well. So I continue working on those embellishment clusters, and you'll notice that I repeated elements in each little cluster with the words, the enamel dots, some washi tape, and the word no one, and that's both for emphasis of the story, and also I use a lot of repetition in clustering anyway, so it all ties in together. And don't be afraid when you're working with a grid design to go ahead and spill over the edges of a grid occasionally, because that can give you more emphasis to your design too. Here it kind of highlights those words, no one, and tells the story a little bit more. Moving on to the next part, I want to use this arrow stamp to stamp arrows straight on my photos to give emphasis to those owls. Now, I practice stamp them on a piece of vellum, and I did this for two reasons. In case the stamping on my actual photo goes badly, I can use those vellum arrows instead. And the other issue I thought about was that some of my stamping is going over a very dark zone, and there indeed you can't really see the stamping very well. So I go ahead and finish up my stamping on my photo, and then I decide really it's not the emphasis I want. So I do go ahead and fussy cut out those arrows out of vellum. Now this vellum wasn't in my kit this month. I just grabbed a little scratch piece from my stash. But that's okay, I'm not cheating too much. And then I'm just going to use a little bit of Glue Dots brand adhesive vellum dots to adhere those to my photos. And there's the adhesive, and then they will be in place. So when I started this layout, I thought I was going to add a bunch of embellishments to each little zone or many of the little zones of pattern paper that I created there. But then I decided, you know what, the pattern is just enough. It's got enough attention going on. I don't need to add more. So I'm just going to add a little bit more emphasis to things with some pin work. And I will add in my journaling. I will add in the date with a roller stamp that I use for all my dates. And then I'm going to go ahead and call this layout done. So here is the layout, and it is all done. You can see barely that I've added the date there, and that little pin work around the edge adds just a touch of emphasis and a tiny bit of journaling down there because I think the title says most of what I had to say to begin with. That is it for the project this time. I will leave you with a couple of photos. Be sure to find the show note links down below so that you can follow the other design team members to their social media and see what projects they created using this grid prompt. And I'll be back on the 18th with one more challenge from the Counterfeit Kit Club. Oh, you guys, if you've seen my videos before, you have met my cat, and he was just relentless today while I was filming. I really appreciate you watching. If you got something helpful out of this video, please do give it a like. That helps my channel. And if you want to catch my future videos, please subscribe.